Famcast Media, bitch.
Happy Martin Luther King Day, demons and demonesses. Good evening, demons and demonesses, and happy Martin Luther King Day to you. Now, I'm not sure what everyone's plans were for Martin Luther King Day. You know, some people are off from work, some people are working, and some people, because they're off from work, they're either, staying home, spending time with their family and whatnot, and, but the main point of this episode is to share the truth about Martin Luther King and who he really is. Now, there's many different versions of Martin Luther King that you might be aware of. Whether it be the Martin Luther King you learned about in school, whether it be the Martin Luther King that's portrayed in the mainstream media, or the Martin Luther King that's portrayed by both major political parties. And this is the Martin Luther King that you were never taught about in high school.
We are able to say to ourselves now that we do count. And I want to say to everybody under the sound of my voice this afternoon that you are somebody. Don't let anybody make you feel that you are nobody. You are somebody. You have dignity. You have worth. Don't be ashamed of yourself, and don't be ashamed of your heritage. Don't be ashamed of your color. Don't be ashamed of your hair. I am black and beautiful and not ashamed to say it. It is a known fact that every politician respects votes, and we have enough potential voting power here to change anything that needs to be changed. And so let us set out to do it, and to do it in no uncertain terms. And finally, I want to say to you that if we will organize like this, we have a power that can change this city.
Now, everybody is aware of Martin Luther King's legacy when it comes to civil rights, when it comes to, his speeches, most notably his I Have a Dream speech. But what most people don't want to talk about because it's politically incorrect was his stance on workers' rights, was his stance on American imperialism, was his stance on healthcare and war and poverty. And based on, the situation that the United States is in, you can kind of understand why. So you see, Martin Luther King was a man decades ahead of his time. Back in the 60s, it was rare if you met someone that was like this. Now, you see, Martin Luther King, not only is he inspirational to, Americans, but he's inspirational to black people and also the working class all over the world. Between his pacifism, between his message of nonviolence, Martin Luther King is basically someone that's loved by everyone, regardless of where you are in the world or what your religious background is. And even despite what your political background is. But unfortunately, some people like to co-opt his legacy. Now, what a lot of people tend to do, you see as establishment Democrats, propping up Martin Luther King, tweeting about Martin Luther King, writing Facebook posts about Martin Luther King, and this and that and the third, talking about civil rights, and, they want to share, those inspirational quotes. And then you have the Republican Party that does the exact same thing. And what's even more cringeworthy is the fact that, both Democrats and Republicans are trying to claim Martin Luther King as one of their own. Democrats claim, oh, Martin Luther King was a Democrat, and then you have, Republicans claiming, oh, Martin Luther King was a Republican. But the truth of the matter is that Dr. Martin Luther King despised both parties. In fact, he remained an independent his entire life, both criticizing the Democratic Party and the Republican Party for both of their flaws. And because of this, he was hated by political elites and the establishment. Conservatives at the time were accusing him of being a communist. You had the FBI breathing down his neck. Both JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson had their issues with him, as well as several other politicians. Now, because of Dr. Martin Luther King's strong beliefs, he was seen as a threat by the establishment. You see, the FBI kept tabs on Dr. Martin Luther King, tapping his phone lines and even, trying to write a letter to him to commit suicide. And when that didn't work, they even doctored up fake tapes to try and make it seem like he cheated on his wife, to try and destroy the civil rights movement and also destroy his marriage in the process. And being that this was the 1960s, dirt like that could both destroy him and the entire civil rights movement. Now, thankfully, many people that were active during the civil rights movement knew that this was completely false, and even Coretta Scott King herself came out and denied those allegations. However, many of these rumors and conspiracy theories are still going around today. Now, growing up and living through several presidencies, Clinton's presidency, Bush presidency, Obama's presidency, Trump's presidency, and now we're only a few days away from Joe Biden's inauguration. So I'll be living through Joe Biden's presidency. And as of 2021, not a single president has actually kept their word and honored his legacy. Now, just earlier today, the ICE agency posted a quote from Martin Luther King and wished everybody a happy MLK Day. And thankfully so, on Twitter, the tweet got ratioed. Now, for those that don't understand what a ratio is, that's basically when you have more quote tweets than likes and retweets. So a lot of people were, expressing their minds on this ICE tweet, and I'm actually glad that people didn't fall for the bullshit. Now, to put this thing into context, I want to give you guys a few quotes from Dr. Martin Luther King so you can see what type of a man he truly was. I'm going to start off with this. Everybody knows that the labor movement did not diminish the strength of the nation, but enlarged it by raising the living standards of millions. So here we have a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, which clearly shows that he did support labor unions. In fact, he was a very strong supporter of workers' rights. In fact, in 1968, he literally spent that entire year prior to his assassination advocating for the rights of workers and poor people. To elaborate, King also said this: "Our needs are identical with labor's needs. We want decent wages and fair working conditions. I do not speak for Negro workers only. A living wage should be the right of all working Americans." Here's another quote from the King. "We must guard against being fooled by false slogans such as right to work, because its purpose is to destroy labor unions and the freedom of the collective bargaining, by which unions have improved wages and working conditions of everyone. Wherever these laws have been passed, wages are lower, job opportunities are fewer, and there are no civil rights. We do not intend to let them do this to us." Now, does this guy sound like someone that would support the establishment? I don't know about you, but it seems like Martin Luther King would have a lot more in common with somebody like Jeremy Corbyn. So if this is who Martin Luther King truly is, where are all the politicians that claim to care about his legacy? And why aren't they passing policy and legislation that, would help fulfill King's dream? That's because a lot of these politicians that claim that they care about King's legacy, most of them are full of shit. He also said this: "I imagine you already know that I am much more socialistic in my economic theory than capitalistic, and yet I am not so opposed to capitalism that I have failed to see its relative merits. It started out with a noble and high motive to block the trade monopolies of nobles. But like most human systems, it fails victim to the very thing it was revolting against. So today, capitalism has outlived its usefulness. It has brought about a system that takes necessities from the masses and gives luxuries to the classes." In another letter he had written, he had this to say: "There must be a better distribution of wealth, and maybe America must move towards a democratic socialism. Call it what you may, call it democracy, or call it democratic socialism, but there must be a better distribution of wealth within this country for all of God's children." Now, you have so many people, both establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans, claiming that, this is a Christian nation, we believe in God and whatnot. Well, if you truly believe in God, then why aren't you doing anything to help God's children? All right, we're literally in a pandemic right now. We have lots of people who, are living in poverty, that can't pay the rent, that can't pay the bills. And, instead of helping the people that need it, millionaires and billionaires are continuing to get richer and richer. You see, a couple years ago, I was just reading a report about, income inequality. the richest people in the world that control 90% of the world's wealth can all fit on a double-decker bus. Now, another thing that I want to bring up, and it should be blatantly obvious, but King was also against the Vietnam War. Which, like I said, it's blatantly obvious because King was a pacifist. He didn't believe in violence. He didn't believe in war. He always remained peaceful throughout all of his entire protests. Now, one of the things that I see a lot of these blue checkmark people doing on Twitter is they're constantly bragging about how diverse, Joe Biden's cabinet picks are. And one of the cabinet picks that I want to speak about is a guy by the name of Lloyd Austin. Now, Lloyd Austin is a Raytheon executive. I think he was paid $1.5 million from Raytheon. And right now he's currently in Joe Biden's administration. He's a black military general, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong in the rank, but all I know is that he's a high-ranking member of the military. Now, like I mentioned, a lot of these blue checkmark people on Twitter are basically bragging, saying, oh gosh, Dr. Martin Luther King would be so proud seeing Lloyd Austin in the position that he's in. Well, this is what King had to say about war. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Now, does that sound like somebody that would support the military-industrial complex? King has been seen several times at protests against the Vietnam War, against all sorts of things. Like I said, if you meet someone that says that they're honoring King's legacy, but yet they don't back policy to show that they support King's legacy, then you know just as well as I know that they're full of shit. But I'm going to continue even further. Now, another thing that people are getting wrong about Dr. King is that a lot of, people, especially those in, social conservative circles, are going around claiming that Dr. Martin Luther King, had he still been alive, he would be against, gay rights and trans rights and stuff like that. Now, from what I understand, back in, I don't know if it was the 50s or the 60s, somebody had wrote a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King. It was a gay teenager who said that he felt the way about men the way he ought to feel about women. Now, back in 1957, a closeted gay teen had written a letter to Dr. Martin Luther King asking for advice. Now, the teenager wrote, "My problem is different from the ones most people have. I am a boy, but I feel about boys the way I ought to feel about girls. I don't want my parents to know about me. What can I do? Is there any place where I can go for help?" Now, being that this is the 1960s, and we already know the political climate at the time, and also know how religious the country was at the time, King's response actually kind of, surprised me. But then again, should it have? King wrote, "Your problem is not at all an uncommon one. However, it does require careful attention. The type of feeling that you have towards boys is probably not an innate tendency, but something that has been culturally acquired. Your reasons for adopting this habit have now been consciously suppressed or unconsciously repressed. Therefore, it is necessary to deal with the problem by getting back to some of the experiences and circumstances that led to the habit. In order to do this, I would suggest that you see a good psychiatrist who can assist you in bringing to the forefront the conscious of all those experiences and circumstances that lead to the habit. You are already on the right road towards a solution since you honestly recognize the problem and have a desire to solve it." Now, to a lot of people that are, in the conservative circles and also in, the extremely religious circles, some people are using this as an opportunity to show that Dr. King was against gay rights. And to be honest, we really don't know what his position would be. Because unfortunately he was assassinated before, the birth of the gay rights movement even started. And some people are saying that, he would be against it because he refers to it as a problem. And to be honest with you, this is back in the 60s. And, like I said, this is back in, the late 50s, early 60s. Not that much information was known about homosexuality. Not that many people knew that, it was born. Some people were still considering it a mental illness. It wasn't removed as a mental illness until 1975, if I'm not mistaken. But, like I said, Dr. King, he was an educated man. I think he would have sided with science. Now, another reason why I say Dr. King most likely wasn't homophobic is because two of the people that he worked with, both Bayard Rustin and James Baldwin. Bayard Rustin was openly gay, and James Baldwin was openly bisexual. Both of them worked with Dr. Martin Luther King and helped organize the March on Washington. Isn't it funny how, like, he had nothing to say to Bayard Rustin or James Baldwin? I mean, don't get me wrong, they had their differences, but their sexual orientation was never mentioned in any of that. Now, although Dr. King wasn't around to witness the birth of the LGBTQ rights movement, his wife, Coretta Scott King, was. And this is what she had to say. For many years now, I have been an outspoken supporter of civil rights and human rights for gay and lesbian people. I still hear people say that I should not be talking about the rights of lesbian and gay people, and I should stick to the issue of racial justice. But I hasten to remind them that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." I appeal to everyone who believes in Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream to make room at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood for lesbian and gay people. Homophobia is just like racism and anti-Semitism and any other forms of bigotry, and that it seeks to dehumanize a large group of people, to deny their humanity, their dignity, and personhood. This sets the stage for further repression and violence that spreads all too easily to victimize the next minority group. Gays and lesbians stood up for civil rights in Montgomery, Selma, in Albany, Georgia, and St. Augustine, Florida, and many other campaigns for the civil rights movement. Many of these courageous men and women were fighting for my freedom at a time when they could find few voices for their own, and I salute their contributions. Now, I believe that if anybody knows Dr. King the best, it would be his wife. And his wife clearly isn't homophobic, so I don't think it's that far to believe that Dr. King probably wasn't homophobic at all. Like I said, it wasn't removed from the mental illnesses until like the 70s. So we could just all we can really do is just chalk it up to King being a product of his time, and that, being that he did hang out with people that were openly gay and never said anything to them, never picked on them, never harassed them, never made any comments about their sexual orientation. I think it's clear to show that Dr. King probably would have opened his mind and probably would have sided with the scientific and the medical community. Now, another thing that, both establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans tend to forget is that Dr. King was also in favor of healthcare, both in a rights to a woman to do whatever she wants with her own body and for, universal healthcare. Now, I know that there are some members of Dr. King's family who are trying to claim that Dr. King would be against healthcare, that Dr. King wouldn't, support a woman's right to choose. But this is what Dr. King had to say at the time. I have always been deeply interested in and sympathetic with the total work of the Planned Parenthood Federation. And not only that, but Dr. Martin Luther King also received an award from the Planned Parenthood Federation. Now, he wasn't able to accept the award in person, but his wife was able to accept it for him in his honor. Now, in regards to healthcare in general, he had this to say: of all of the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. Now, Dr. Martin Luther King is a Christian, which a lot of people in the United States claim to be. All right? Now, answer me this honest question. Who would Jesus deny healthcare to? Last time I checked, Jesus was, healing the sick. He was healing the blind. He was raising people from the dead. Was Jesus asking for people's insurance? Was Jesus asking people to pay them an arm and a leg and to risk going into bankruptcy so he could heal them? No. And that's one of the things that I don't understand. We have money to waste on, military spending and this and that and the third. But when it comes to actually helping the common man, everyone's like, oh, well, we don't have the money for it. We don't have the money for it. You have the money for it. The problem is the fact that our elected officials don't really give a fuck about honoring this man's legacy. They like to parade themselves as, civil rights champions. They like to parade themselves with, fascinating quotes from Martin Luther King. But these are all the quotes that people won't share. You won't see any really. I mean, you won't see somebody like Nancy Pelosi or Kamala Harris or fucking Joe Biden or even on the Republican side, somebody like Donald Trump or Josh Hawley or Ted Cruz sharing these quotes. You know, they'll share images of Martin Luther King. They'll share quotes from his I Have a Dream speech, but they won't share any quotes like these. And I think we all know the reason why. They only support Dr. King for his symbolism. They don't care about his values, because if they did, they would fight for it, and they would pass policy positions that would, continue his dream. But, instead of, making Martin Luther King's dream a reality, they turned his dream into a nightmare. And that's with a black president. And I don't think having, a black vice president is going to change really much of anything. I mean, you do have some people. You do have people like Yang. You do have people like, Cortez. You do have Bowman. You have Cori Bush. Can't forget about Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib as well. So there are people out there like that. And then you have those that, aren't exactly in that position, that are, working towards it. Michaela Wilkes, for example. Some would even say, Bernie Sanders. But, all these people claiming that they care about King's legacy, it's all just for show. I mean, I'm seeing right through their images. It's just utterly pathetic at this point. Now, you see, as a Satanist, I have my own criticism when it comes to Christianity. But, when it comes to somebody like Martin Luther King was a true Christian. He believed everything that he preached. Like I said, he was a pacifist. He believed in, helping people that were less fortunate, which is exactly what Jesus did. And it's funny how, the same people that say that they worship God and that they love Jesus are so quick to, just to cherry pick King's message, just like they cherry pick everything that's in the Bible. Well, that's all I have to say about this. Hope you guys learned a few things. Like I said, this is the stuff that they won't teach you in school. These are the quotes that won't be shared on, social media by, any elected officials or, anybody that has a high profile. So with that being said, I hope you guys have a great holiday. Stay safe. Hail Satan. So that's all for today, demons and demonesses. And I'm going to end this on a non-metal song called Wishing by Edo G, Pete Rock, and Master Ace. Here we go.
The president would stop lying, black babies would stop crying, and young brothers would stop dying. I wish the police would stop killing, politicians stop stealing and acting like they not dealing when they know they got bricks in the street at the country club fixing to eat. I can see them now. I wish we get this shit figured out and stop going the trigger route and acting all niggered out on the block with the 9-cock. I wish we try and stop wishing for the pine box. I wish we wasn't so obsessed with death. Tell me, is it cause we blessed with less? I don't know really. I wish the world was safer. I'm scared to travel abroad. That's why I travel with the Lord. I wish a cab would stop for me in the rain. I know you wanna call me insane. I'm a dreamer.
I have a dream. One day, people injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream.
I wish I didn't get searched when I come through customs. I wish Christians stop beefing with Muslims. Wish the poor didn't have to take welfare. Wish America had universal health care. Cause there ain't no help here. In a country where we don't fight fair, the American dream becomes a nightmare. It's all hype here, and on this track, my soul I might bear. I wish Bush just get out of office before he start World War III and try to off us. It won't cost them, but it'll cost us. And right now, believe me, you lost us.